How did Jesus care for people's interior life? As apostles of the interior life and as family members of the apostles of the interior life, I think that we are called in a unique way to be attentive to our own interior life and to the interior life of those that the Lord places on our path. And so the question that I offer for your reflection today is, how did Jesus care for people's interior life? And as I prayed with this question, these three words came to mind, and those are that he cared for them in a timely fashion, in a surgical fashion, and in a merciful fashion. So Jesus was timely, surgical, and merciful in the way he cared for people's interior lives. So let's look at some passages in scripture where we can see this applied, and hopefully any of these passages that I'm about to share with you can be an avenue for your own prayer time. So the first one that comes to mind is our beloved Samaritan woman. You know that this is the passage that inspired Father Salvatore when he founded our community over 30 years ago now. And so Jesus waited for the Samaritan woman at noon, knowing that she would come. So this is where I see that he was very timely. He didn't go there early in the morning. He knew she wouldn't show up at that time. He didn't go there later in the day, but he went exactly at the time when he knew he would encounter her. So he was very intentional in picking the correct time. So he was very timely. And then he was surgical, meaning that he didn't beat around the bush like surgeons do. Surgeons just go in and take care of business as they have to. And Jesus' words to her were very, quote unquote, surgical, very direct and clean cut. He asked her, or he said, "Go call your husband." So again, he didn't get lost in the details of her life, all the things that she has made mistakes about, but just with that question, "Go call your husband," he was able to enter the deepest place of her pain, which was her need for, men in her life, probably to assure her or to validate her. And then Jesus showed his merciful approach by telling her, "What you have said is true." So to the question or to the comment, "Go call your husband," she replied, I don't have a husband. And that's when he said, "You're right. You've had 5, and the guy that you are with now is not your husband. What you have said is true." It really struck me as I was praying that Jesus is underlying the truth of her statement, and he's not underlining the shame of her state in life. So that is, to me, one beautiful way that we can look at the Lord to learn how to approach people that come our way, whether they're family members, relatives, co-workers, our neighbors, people that we meet, in our daily interactions. Another passage that strikes me is the call of Simon, and this is in Luke 5. So it strikes me that Jesus knows how to deal with men, and he knows how to deal with women. He knows our psychology, and therefore he approaches us differently. So with women, he sits down, takes his time, Martha and Mary, he goes and visits them in Bethany. With the Samaritan woman, he sits down at the well. He knows that women need time. He knows that as a male, he knows that the best way to reach a woman's heart is to give her time. Now, on the contrary, he also knows that guys are much more ready for actions. And so he walks by, sees Zacchaeus up on the tree, says, "Come down, let's go." He's walking by, he sees Matthew sitting at the customs post. He says, "Get up, let's go." So again, the Lord approaches people with different genders in a different way because he knows what we need. And so here, when he calls Simon, again, he's very timely in his approach. He reaches Simon while they were washing their nets. And there's more than that, right? We know that they're washing their nets after a night where they didn't catch anything. And he invites them to lower the nets after a fruitless night of work. Again, it's very surgical. He came in at the right time. He probably came in at the time of the highest frustration, maybe at a time of shame. Because at the end of the day, if you just spent the night out working and you caught nothing, I'm sure you weren't happy. I'm sure Simon was not happy about that. And so the Lord came in right away, caring for Simon, for his soul, for his heart. And he did that in a merciful way by saying, do not be afraid. You'll be catching men. God is reassuring Simon. And this is in my experience as a spiritual director also to many men. I see that the way I offer spiritual direction to women is different than the way I offer spiritual direction to men. That is, the ways in which I reassure people, men or women, is different. And I try to learn from the way the Lord does it. So again, the Lord is it's not showing up going like, caught nothing, huh? That would not fly with a guy. But he just invites them, says, lower your nets. Go for it. He instills trust in them. And then the last example that I use in today's meditation is from the walk with the disciples that are walking away from Jerusalem and going towards Emmaus. Again, the timely, surgical, and merciful fashion. Let's look at those three categories. So the first one is timely. He catches up with them as they're walking away from Jerusalem. So he encounters them as they have time. They couldn't really go anywhere else. And that's one of the things that Sister Tiziana would always tell us when, all of us youngsters, although I've been in community for almost 30 years, but I do remember my first year's information, Tiziana would say the best time to approach people and do a direct apostolate is when they're on a train because they're stuck. I mean, they're just sitting next to you. They can't go anywhere. And so that's just a great time to just engage in conversations and show that you care for them and their interior life. And so I feel that the Lord was employing the same method right here. He starts walking with them where they're walking away. They have nowhere else to go. And so they can't run away from the Lord walking alongside with them. And then he's very surgical in the way in which he asks, what sort of things? So what are you talking about? And the guys immediately open up and they tell the Lord, are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who has no clue what just happened? And so that kind of forced them to open up and to share everything they've been going through. And so scripture says that he interpreted for them, he opened for them scriptures. And then the merciful way, the merciful fashion in which he approached them is he went in to stay with them. Again, he wasn't shocked by their lack of understanding. He wasn't blaming them. He wasn't making fun of them. He simply gave them his presence, and then we know they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. And so this makes me think about very often in my apostolate, whether it's with people on an airplane or students on campus or my own family members, I realize that an almost infallible method of bringing people back to be in contact with their own interior life is nostalgia. Just bringing them back to what they remember from the past, from when they were children, that maybe struck them or that they enjoyed. And very often people will say things like, oh my gosh, I remember as a kid I would go over to my grandparents' house and we would pray a rosary before going to bed, or I remember my grandma kneeling next to my bedside. And so one way is to take advantage of these tender moments, memory that people have, to bring them back to those memories that where grace was clearly at work. And this actually makes me think, recently I heard that the RCIA, newly rebranded as OCIA, the RCIA program here at Texas A&M at St. Mary's it will just blow your mind. I hope many of you will be able to come to the family reunion at the end of May here in College Station, and you will see with your own eyes. So we currently have 120 young men and women in the RCIA program that will become Catholic at Easter. And of these, about 60 were already baptized Catholic but never went through confirmation. The other 60 are people that are becoming Catholic. 30 baptisms and 30 that were baptized in a Protestant church and now are becoming Catholic. So 120. And we're just launching the new group that starts now in January and will be confirmed in the fall. And this group is already 160 and still counting. So tonight they have the first meeting. So 160 was last week of those signed up. That is just, mind blowing. But very often when we ask these young people, what brings you here? And several of them will say, oh, you know what? My grandparents were Catholic, and then my parents were raised Catholic, or one of them, fell away from the church. But this nostalgia of going back to what they remember their grandparents doing for them. So I hope that this brings a lot of hope to many of you who are parents or grandparents, to know that there's a lot stirring across this nation. But of course I can speak for this particular place here in Texas. And so maybe one way to now move into more of a reflection for yourselves is to think, if Jesus operates in the present time in a timely fashion, which is the kairos, the Greeks have two ways to express the concept of time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is the time as it unfolds and it rolls, from which we have the words chronometer, chronological. But then there's the kairos, and kairos is the appointed time, is a one time in history, it's very surgical, if you will. So one question for your own reflection is, what is my relationship with time when it comes for caring for someone's interior life? And we can go two directions. Do I rush or do I hesitate? So do I just jump the gun and just rush through things, or the opposite, do I just hesitate? And I believe that both can be lost opportunities to usher people to an encounter with Jesus. Because if we are too rushed, as they say, the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. So sometimes we just say the right thing, but if it's the wrong time, we burned our opportunities. Or if we hesitate, it's the wrong time, and therefore it's the wrong thing. So we lost opportunities for them to encounter the Lord. Another question regarding the surgical aspect is my approach surgical, or do I use a spiritual chainsaw instead of a scalpel? Do I go in trying to take everything all at once, or do I go step by step? Do I try to go all the truth at once, or taking steps? And I think, as you know me, I use a lot of analogies, but if someone is dehydrated, you hook them up to an IV, not to a fire hydrant. Drip, drip, drip will do much more than a fire hydrant to someone who is dehydrated. So step by step, piccoli passi possibili, as Chiara Corbella used to say. And then the last one is for the merciful fashion. Let us ask ourselves, have I mastered the art of never separating truth and love when I encounter someone. And if I have not yet, which teacher am I following? Jesus is really the only one that can teach me the fine art of caring for his beloved children's soul, because he made those souls. So he knows exactly who needs what when. So let us go to the Lord, so that we can be reassured that in our zeal for apostolate, in our apostolic zeal, we won't cause any scarring that is still bleeding, maybe among my family or friends, because maybe of the lack of timely fashion, the lack of surgical approach, and the lack of merciful fashion. So I hope that this can be helpful, some helpful reflection for your prayer time. God bless.